Despite the charming name, Lavinia's story is far from being pleasant. Wayfarer House used to provide a safe haven for weary travelers, but Lavinia turned it into a den of horrors. When she was finally arrested, a mountain of evidence had already piled up against her, painting a gruesome picture of her crimes. Legend has long proclaimed Lavinia Fisher as the first recognized female serial killer in the United States. However, historical records reveal that her childhood, birthplace, and maiden name are unknown, making her title questionable. Nevertheless, the wickedness of her deeds is undisputed. The rumors surrounding her story began to spread after she married John Fisher, and the couple started operating the 6 Mile Wayfarer House, a hotel situated 6 miles outside Charleston, South Carolina in the early 1800s. Mysteriously, men visiting Charleston began to disappear, and reports filed with the authorities pointed to their last sighting at the hotel. Despite an investigation, no evidence was found to implicate the Fishers, who were popular in the community. Lavinia's beauty and charm only added to their popularity, but it was later revealed that she used these traits to help her husband rob and murder many male travelers. As the number of missing men grew, the rumor mill began to work its magic, and the citizens of Charleston, determined to put an end to their city's already struggling economy's troubles, formed a well-armed mob under Lynch's law. On February 16, 1819, they took matters into their own hands and apprehended the Fishers. While it's unclear what transpired during their encounter, a man named David Ross was left to keep watch. Unfortunately, Ross was ambushed by a group of men that included Lavinia Fisher. Despite Ross pleading for help, Lavinia brutally attacked him by choking him and smashing his head through a window. Ross miraculously managed to escape and reported the incident to the authorities. Around the same time, John Peoples, a traveler from Georgia, arrived at the 6 Mile Wayfarer House seeking lodging for the night. Lavinia greeted him warmly and invited him in for tea, despite the hotel being full. John found her company pleasant and answered all of her questions, but felt uncomfortable when her husband began giving him odd glances. After being shown to his room, John became uneasy and decided to sit in a chair by the door instead of sleeping in the bed. In the middle of the night, he was awakened by a loud noise and realized that the bed he was supposed to sleep in had disappeared into a hole beneath the floor. Realizing he could be a target for robbery, he jumped out the window and fled to the authorities in Charleston. John's actions led to the arrest of Lavinia and her husband, along with 2 men they had been working with. The 6 Mile Wayfarer House was searched and found to have hidden passages and mechanisms that were used to trap and rob travelers. The sheriff discovered items that could be traced to dozens of victims, including a tea laced with a sleep-inducing herb and a trap door that led to a basement filled with remains. In May, the Fishers were found guilty of multiple robberies and slangs after pleading not guilty and were sentenced to hang. While awaiting the execution, they devised an escape plan and successfully used a rope made from jail linens to descend from their cell window. Unfortunately, the rope broke, and John Fisher returned to the jail to be with his wife Lavinia. After their failed escape attempt, the Fishers were kept under much tighter security. However, in February of 1820, their appeal was rejected, and they were scheduled to be hanged later that month. Before their execution, the Fishers were visited by Reverend Richard Furman, who counseled them. John Fisher talked to the minister and begged for his soul to be saved, while Lavinia refused to speak with him. On the morning of February 18, 1820, the Fishers were taken from the Charleston jail to be hanged. John Fisher went quietly, praying with the minister and insisting on his innocence in a letter that was read to a crowd of 2,000 people. He then verbally pleaded his case before the gathered crowd, asking for their forgiveness before he was hanged. Lavinia, on the other hand, wasn't as cooperative. She had requested to wear her wedding dress and had to be carried to the gallows as she refused to walk. Before the noose was tightened around her neck, she ranted and raved before the crowd, screaming at the Charleston socialites who she blamed for encouraging her conviction. She even taunted the crowd by saying, "If you have a message you want to send to hell, give it to me, I'll carry it." Then, before her punishers could finish the job, she jumped off the scaffold herself, but didn't reach the ground. Onlookers later confirmed that her stare was wicked and chilling. Despite the popular myth that the Fishers were buried in the Unitarian Church graveyard in Charleston, it's more likely that they were buried in a Potter's Field cemetery next to the jail, where most criminals were buried if their bodies weren't claimed by family members. Additionally, there's no evidence in church records to suggest that Lavinia Fisher was buried there. It's possible that tour guides have perpetuated this story over the years. After the infamous execution of Lavinia Fisher, reports of her ghost haunting the city of Charleston quickly emerged. Locals reported seeing her face floating behind the window bars of her former cell in the old jail building, which served as the Charleston County Jail from 1802 to 1939. However, her ghostly appearances weren't just limited to the jail building, as people began to report seeing her wandering around the neighborhood and the nearby Unitarian Cemetery after the Great Earthquake of 1886. Dating back to 1738, the old jail building served as a workhouse for runaway slaves and a hospital for the poor. In the years that followed, the building became a jail and asylum, housing inmates who faced harsh and barbaric punishment, including whippings, brandings, and burning at the stake. Today, the Old City Jail is a National Trust for Historic Preservation project, and restoration efforts have led to reports of strange occurrences. Workers have found footprints in the dust after the building had been locked off for months, and some have reported seeing a man in ragged clothing wandering the halls, thought to be the spirit of a former slave. However, the most famous ghost said to haunt the building is that of Lavinia Fisher, who is often seen wearing her bright red and white wedding dress. Despite efforts to restore and maintain the building, reports of ghostly sightings continue to this day, making the old jail building one of Charleston's most haunted places. According to historical records, Lavinia Fisher was the first female serial killer in the United States. However, this reputation may actually go to Jane Toppin, who confessed to 31 killings in 1901. While Fisher and her husband John were never charged with murder, they were known to rob travelers, which at the time was a capital punishment. The Charleston Courier reported on February 22, 1819, the arrest of Fisher and many others who had been terrorizing the road near the city. The mob had burned down a house and beaten its residents before assaulting and robbing a traveler. The district sheriff led a posse of citizens to apprehend the group, which consisted of 3 males and 2 women. The group was found with several muskets and a keg of powder, but were no match for the posse. The group was arrested and committed to jail, and it was hoped that the vigilance of the police and citizens would lead to the capture of any remaining members of the gang. The story of John and Lavinia Fisher is a harrowing depiction of the brutal realities of early American crime and punishment. It's a striking reminder of the horrors that occurred at the time, as well as the anguish of countless others who endured comparable situations. Let us not forget the sorrow and struggles of those who came before us as we reflect on this tragic chapter in American history, and let us endeavor to create a just and equitable society for everyone. May the departed spirits rest in peace, even as their stories continue to send shivers down our spines. If you like this video, please consider subscribing to our channel for more interesting tales. We appreciate your support and look forward to sharing more content with you in the future.